Welcome to LIVEDAF, your online Daf Yomi Shiur.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, which is Eruvin Daf Yud. We have 14 lines from the top on Yud Amud Aleph. The Gemara taught us that a lechi which is visible on the outside, it's nira mi bachutz, that can be applied and is effective to the mavi as well. So as long as it's visible from the exterior of the mavi, so when you're looking at the mavi, you notice it. That works. That works to separate the mavi, because if the bnei rishus harabim, who are looking at it from the outside, see the mavi as a separate entity, that concept can be applied to within the mavi as well, to consider it separate from rishus harabim. So nira mi bachutz works even though it's not visible from the inside, from the interior of the mavi. The Gemara told us this was a halacha taught by Rav Huna, and we actually had a kash on it from a brisa, which seems to indicate otherwise, seems to refute the halacha of Rav Huna. Says the Gemara 14 lines from the top, at the end of that line, Amar Rav Yosef, Lo yishmil li hashmaitza. I never heard this halacha in the name of Rav Huna. Rashi explains elsewhere that Rav Yosef, due to his illness, forgot the many halachas. And the Gemara told us that Abaye, who was his Talmud, would remind him. Same thing we find here. Rav Yosef says, I never heard this halacha. Amar le Abaye at Amras Ni'alan. You actually were the one who taught us this halacha in the name of Rav Huna. Ve'aha Amras Ni'alan. And it was actually in this context. It was applied to the following halacha. The Amar Rami bar Abba Amar Rav Huna. So this was in the name of Rav Huna. He told us the following halacha. Lechi ha-moishech im dafnei shel mavai. If one has a lechi, which is extending from the mavi outwards, so you have the wall of the mavi, and there's a lechi affixed to the tip of that wall, extending into the rishus harabim, acting as a lechi. Now, it's a thin lechi, narrower than the actual thickness of the wall. So it's visible, but it's only visible from the outside, from rishus harabim. Why? Because the inner edge, the inner surface of this lechi is flush with the inner surface of this mavi. So if the mavi's wall is, let's say, this thick, the lechi is affixed to the interior portion of that wall, and the inner surface of that lechi seems to be just a continuation of the wall of the lechi, of the wall of the mavi. So when you're in the mavi, you don't notice that lechi. You only notice it from the outside due to the fact that it's thinner, it's narrower than the thickness of the mavi. So this is a typical example of nira mibachutz v'shavim mibifnim. So Rav Huna taught us that this lechi, which is moishech im dafnei shel mavi, can it be used as a lechi? Depends how long it is. Pachas midal amis, if it extends less than 4 amas in length, nidan mishum lechi, that is considered to be a lechi. Umishtamesh im chudaya pnimi. So this allows usage of the mavi. You can go carry inside the mavi until the actual lechi, until the inner edge of the lechi. That's the beginning of the lechi, because one cannot carry beside the lechi itself. So that's only if the lechi extends less than 4 amas. Then it has the size of a lechi. But if it's dalad amas, if it's a very long lechi, it's 4 amas long, it is no longer regarded as a lechi, it's too large. Nidan mishum mavi. It is considered like a mavi wall, because the minimum length of a mavi is 4 amas. So when a lechi extends, it goes for 4 amas, that has a din like a wall of a mavi. We don't treat it like a lechi. And now you may no longer use and carry throughout this mavi, which does not have a lechi. So this was the halacha that Rami bar Abba said in the name of Rav Huna. And this is Abaye speaking to Rav Yosef. You actually made a comment on this halacha. Va'at amr son Allah. And you referenced this halacha. You added your comment by saying, Shma minot las. We learn from here 3 concepts. Number 1, Shma minot ben l'chayayim asr. One may not carry alongside the lechi. So ben l'chayayin, the Lashon Rabbah, Rashi explains, it's referring to the lechi. It just means it's referring to the many lechis found in many alleyways. So alongside a lechi is not considered within the confines of the lechi, within confines of the kaira, of the mavoi. And one cannot carry alongside the lechi. We learned earlier, Taisus explained that since a lechi can typically be just a thin, flimsy pole, which is not so visible and discernible, we're concerned if he carries there, he might carry right outside the rishus harabim as well. So one cannot carry alongside a lechi. That's number 1. How do we know this from this halacha? Because Rav Huna just told us that when the lechi is valid, that allows carrying in the mavi until where? Until the actual beginning of the lechi, but not alongside the lechi. So that's number one. Number two, we hear from this, Ushmamino meshech mavi ba'arba amis, that the length of a mavi is 4 amis. Therefore, a lechi, which extends at a distance of 4 amis, is considered like a mavi wall, because this is the shiur of a mavi, as though it is a wall of a mavi and is no longer considered a lechi. Ushmamino, we also hear from this, nira mibachutz, shavim mibifnim, when something is merely visible on the outside, v'shavim mibifnim, but from the inside it's not visible. For instance, in this case where the lechi was flush to the interior surface of the mavi wall, so it doesn't appear like a lechi, it's not protruding. That's enough to be considered a lechi. So it's actually you who gave us this interpretation and concluded for us that when something is visible on the outside, that's enough. And that is Rav Huna's halacha. Concludes the Gemara, indeed, v'hilchasa, the final halacha is nira mibachutz, v'shavim mibifnim, nida mishum lechi, we consider it a lechi. Says, how can that be? Tiyufta v'hilchasa. Just a bit earlier, we had a kasha from that brisa which told us about the chatzah, which was 11 amos wide. Then we had a refutation to Rav Huna from that brisa. We seem to learn that nira b'chutz is not sufficient. So on the one hand, you have a tiyufta refutation. Now you conclude v'hilchasa, that the halacha follows Rav Huna, that nira b'chutz is considered a lechi. How do these two things go hand in hand? It says more in, yes, we do follow that shita mishum the Tani Rav Chia kavasei, because Rav Chia actually taught us a brisa which concurred with Rav Huna that a nira b'chutz is sufficient to be considered a lechi. Continues the Gemara of Aracham Me'esa Amais Yamayit. Mishnah told us that if the entry to the mavi is wider than 10 amis, that's no longer regarded as a pesach. It's a breach in the wall, and you must go ahead and lessen the width of that doorway to make it narrow. It can't be more than 10 amis. Amar Abai, Tana, we learned in the Brisa, V'racham Me'esa Yamayit, you must lessen the width of that doorway. Rabbi Yudah Me'ena Terach L'mayit, there's no need to narrow the entryway. V'ad kama. Rabbi allows greater than 10, but what is his maximum? Until how far can we go? How wide can the entryway be? Savar of Achi. So Rav Achi figured Kameder of Yosef. He was presenting in front of Yosef L'meima to say as follows: Ad shloish esrei amo shlish. The widest we can allow the entryway to be built, according to Rav Yehuda, is 13 ames and a third. How do we get to that number? The kavachomer bepasi berois. This will be derived with a kavachomer from the entryway, which is present by pasi berois. Pasi berois are posts which are constructed around berois, these wells in Rosh Hashanah. Let's take a look at Rashi, who describes this. 8 lines from the bottom. It says Rashi, pasi berois shetartuvem. In the case of pasi berois, we allow an entryway which is shlosh esrei amo shlish, 13 amos and a third. The Snan beperek sheni, as we learned in the second parak, when we erect posts, boards around the wells in Rosh Hashanah, the well or the spring there is 10 deep, 10 tfachim deep, which makes it a Rishus HaYachid. One cannot draw water from them and place it on the ridge of the well, because he's taking from Rishus HaYachid into the street, which is just a rabbin. Chacham were concerned about the regular people who come to Yerushalayim with all their livestock. There's a great need to have water available to feed their animals. So if one cannot draw from these wells, how are they going to accommodate their animals? Chachamim applied a special allowance. They applied the heter of pasi berois, lasois arba diyumdim, to erect 4 diyumdim. Diyumdim are twin posts, so L-shaped posts, which are placed, 4 of them, around this well. So the L-shaped post is facing in 2 directions. So you have 4 of these posts placed around the bear. That creates an enclosure. It's as though there are 4 mechitzas there. And that makes the enclosed area of Shus HaYachid. Now one can go ahead and draw from the well into this enclosure and feed his animal. So v'yitir chacham lasis arba duyum del arba peis on the four corners l'shavye ben apasim shayachid to create a shayachid between these pasim. Umutal lamalis. V'shav Rabbi Yehuda laharchik zemezeh. How far can these posts be situated from each other? Rabbi Yehuda allows a space of 13 amas and a third. How do we get to that number? Explains Rashi. V'shav Rabbi Yehuda laharchik zemezeh, to place them at a distance, one from the other, maloi shnei ravakos, the amount, the size that is needed for 2 pairs of cows, shalar ba bakar, each group. So you have animals tied together, used for plowing fields. So you have 4 cows tied together. And perhaps one is going to be going in and one going out at the same time. So we need enough space for 8 of these cows. V'oiv para, what is the thickness of each one? Amma u'shnei shlishi amma. Each para, each cow is an amma and 2/3. So 8 times this amount equals 13 and a third. The havalu shlish esrei amma shlish, 13 and a third, to accommodate 8 cow. The shmoina baka to accommodate the 8 cows which are coming through this entryway. So we see that the entryway of a pasi birois according to Rabbi Yehuda is up until 13 and a third to accommodate these animals. So the Gemara figured that we're going to apply the same number to the Pesach Mabi, because we find that the concept of Pesach can apply even to such a wide entryway of 13 and a third. Therefore, apparently, even in the Mavi, one can do the same according to Rabbi Yehuda. Let's take a look at the Gemara. So this is going to be derived with the Kal V'chomer from Pasi Berois. Explains the Gemara, what is the Kal V'chomer? Uma Pasi Berois. Since we find that those Pasi Berois, Shirtarta Behen, Parotz Merubah Lo'emed. So since we find that Pasi Berois, despite the fact that there is a special allowance, what is the heter that is applied there? We allow an enclosure to be considered shayachid, even though it's mostly exposed, not mostly enclosed. It only has these 4 posts on the 4 edges. So its porous, the exposed area, the gaps in the wall, is merubah al-moed, is greater than the oimed, than the built portion. So the unbuilt is greater than the built. So it's a special allowance over there. So despite the fact that we have that special heter, nevertheless, when it comes to giving us the dimensions, what is the maximum allowed for the actual entryway? You do not allow yoiser mishlish am mishlish. You don't allow more than 13 and a third, despite the fact that you have the heter. Look, you don't even need more built than unbuilt. You can have more parts, more gaps, more open exposed area in this enclosure than the built portion. Nevertheless, you don't allow more than 13 and a third. So despite the fact that it has an advantage, so to speak, you're very lenient when it comes to the actual shiur of the oimed, of the walls. You're still going to be machmer. You're not going to allow more than 13 and a third for the entryway. So certainly when it comes to the mavi, we shouldn't allow more than 13 and a third. Why? Mavish le'tartaboy. Parts merubah la'omed. When it comes to mavi, we don't find that we allow parts merubah la'omed. We don't allow more exposure than enclosure, meaning the mavi is mostly enclosed. It was on all 3 sides. It needs to be mostly enclosed. The built portion must be greater than the gaps found around this mavi and those walls, etc. So it's a universal concept, a universal requirement of oimed merubah parts, which is applied to the mavi. You need more oimed than parts. So since we find the stringency, certainly ein din isn't illogical to say that when it comes to determining the size of the entryway, you must be machmer. You can't go past 13 and a third. You can't be better than pasi berois. Ein din shlei tataboy. You should not allow in the mavi an entryway which is greater yoisem mishlish esamer shlish. So Kal V'chomer works as follows: if the pasi berois, despite the fact that it has a kula, it's mostly exposed, still we see that when it comes to the entryway, we don't allow greater than 13 and a third to allow those parais and no more. Certainly when it comes to the mavi, where we see we're more machmer, we require the oimed portion, the built portion, to be greater than the unbuilt portion. Of course, when it comes to determining the size of the entryway, you can't allow greater than 13 and a third. We find that to be a shiur of a Pesach to accommodate the animals there. So apparently that falls into the confines regarded within the perimeters of a doorway, it's considered to be an entranceway, and not a pirza. Therefore, we can allow it by mavi as well. Says the Gemara, Vihi hani senas. This very same logic that you're applying to the Kal V'chomer can actually form the basis to actually allow more by the mavi, to allow a larger Pesach by the mavi. Why? By the Pasei B'rois, it's strictly because you had the heter, you applied an allowance of paratz meruba, you allow them to be used despite the fact that it's mostly exposed, mostly unbuilt. It's paratz meruba loimed. So since it has that allowance, meaning the walls, they are so incomplete, that's the very same reason why you don't want to allow a great open doorway. That is the very reason why, indeed, you can't go past 13 and a third, because those walls are so incomplete. Such partial walls are just merely 4 posts. So yeah, it's logical to say that the doorway in between, the entryway, can't be greater than 13 and a third. It's meant to accommodate those animals. Can't go past that, because those walls are so incomplete. In contrast to the mavi, which has proper walls, it's mostly an enclosed area. Perhaps this should be the very reason to allow a larger entryway. The mavi, this simply because, for this very reason, that you didn't allow the parts to be greater than the oimid, you require it to be mostly contained. So it has proper mechitzas, it's properly enclosed. That is the very reason to actually be more lenient when it comes to the size of the doorway. Perhaps that should be the very reason to allow a larger doorway. So you can't derive mavi from Pasei B'rois. Perhaps although Rabbi Yehuda limits the entryway at the Pasei B'rois to 13 and a third, when it comes to mavi, which is a properly built area, maybe the entryway could be larger. Inami, says the Gemara. Alternatively, so perhaps we'll take another avenue. We'll take the opposite approach. That we need to be machmim more by the mavi than over there. Pasei B'rois da'kilas v'chad kula. In contrast to Pasei B'rois, where we actually applied 1 kula, which is the fact that we allow parutz meruba lo'emed, that the unbuilt should be larger and greater than the built area, and we allow that area to be used despite the fact that there's very little presence of built walls. So 1 allowance, 1 kula was applied. Akalbu kula achrina. Likewise, this should cause us to add another kula and allow even a large entryway. The point here is that the Pasei B'rois is built and configured to accommodate the animals. That's the concept, underlying concept there. So 4 posts is sufficient with this large entryway to allow the animals through. It's specific for that context. But when it comes to a mavi, an ordinary structure, mavi klal klaloi. Over here we shouldn't allow anything past your standard 10 amis. Meaning, if anything, perhaps mavi should be more stringent and shouldn't be allowed to have a large entryway. Basically what we're saying is we can't learn from one from the other. It's certainly clear that Yehuda allows larger than 10, but we're not sure how far we're going to go. On the one hand, we say, well, maybe we can make a very large entryway. Perhaps, actually you can't, because we're not meant to be makel by a mavi. So we're unsure, we leave it unconclusive. We're not sure what is the exact size of the entryway according to Yehuda. Continues the Gemara. Tani Levi taught a brayso, mavi shurachav esr mam. What if you have a entryway to a mavi, which is wider than 20 amas wide? How do you address that? It's larger than 10. He simply places a pole right in the middle of that entryway, splitting it into 2, resulting in an entryway on this side, which is 10 or less, and likewise on the other side, which is okay, which falls within the parameters of a properly sized entryway. Says the Gemara, so Levi actually dictated this price, but he concluded we don't follow this halacha. Why? Says Rashi, the bottom line, ein halacha ka'isa mishnah, So last line of the Amud. Explains Rashi, what's wrong with this pole situated right in the middle of the entryway with a large gap on either side? The air, the space on this side of the pole, with the haigis and the space on the other side of the pole, will come along, join forces, and nullify this pole. Since the area, the empty space on both sides of this pole are actually greater in size, larger than this small pole, it's mevatale l'kana, it nullifies the kana, and we don't reckon with it. Therefore, we cannot simply place a kana right in the middle of the entryway. Ikad the Amid is another version of Amar Shmuel, Mishmei Levi, Shmuel quoted Levi, as saying, Ein halacha is a Mishnah, we don't follow this halacha. Elahechi Ovid, if so, what is the proper approach? How is it going to enable this mavi for use, this wide entrance, which is 20 amas? Amar Shmuel Mishmei Levi as follows. Oise paska voya asora, b'meshach arba amas. He takes a board, passes a board which is 10 tefachim high, which is a shiur mechitza, as we learned earlier on Daf Dalet. He takes a board which is 10 tefachim high, b'meshach arba amas, which is at least 4 amas long, uma'amidoi l'orka shel mavi, and he slices the mavi in half, meaning you have the large mavi, which is 20 amas wide. How does he go ahead and narrow that entryway? Very simple. He takes a board and runs it right through the middle of that mavi. Begins at the entry point and runs it at least 4 amas into the mavi. By doing so, he splits, so to speak, the mavi into two, because 4 amas is a shiur mavi. And this results in each Pesach, we have 2 mavi, so to speak, side by side, each one having its own independent entryway, which is 10 amas or less, and you're okay. Let's take a look at Rashi. Actually, let's see the Gemara just a bit further. Inami, another option to break down the entryway and to narrow it to its proper size. Inami K'Rav Yehuda, the Amar of Yehuda. Mavi shu rochav chamesh esrei amma. One has a mavi which is 15 amas wide, and has to get it down to 10. So what do? Marachik shtei amas. V'oitze pas shalosh amas. Very simple. He takes a pas which is 3 amas long. This time you don't need such a big pas, merely a board which is 3 amas wide. And he places it where? At a distance of 2 amas from the wall of the mavi. So the mavi is 15 amas wide. So he needs to go ahead and close up how much? 5 amas to break it down, bring it down to 10. How does he break it down? He doesn't actually need to block off 5 completely. There's a way around that. He applies the concept that we discussed earlier of oimed merubel parts. If it's mostly built, if you have a portion which is mostly built and partially gapped open, the oimed is more than the breach, then it's considered to be fully enclosed. So Rav Yehuda tells us he takes a board which is 3 amas wide and places it 2 amas from the wall. So there's 15 amas of entry. He takes a board which is 3 amas wide and places it at a distance of 2 amas from that wall. So the board, which is 3 amas long, is actually greater in size than the gap. So it's oimed meruba al haparts. So this we will consider the entire 5 to be closed off. So once you close 5, so you got rid of that 5, and now you're left with only 10, which is a properly sized entryway to a mavi. So again, the words in the Gemara, mavi shirachav chamesh esrei amma. If the mavi is 15 amas wide, marchik shtei amas. So he spaces, goes ahead and creates a gap of 2 amas. He leaves 2 amas near the wall, empty, v'oisa pas shalosh amas, and goes ahead and affixes a board 3 amas wide. Now we'll consider the entire 5 to be enclosed and permit carrying this mavi, which only has an entryway which is 10 amas wide. Let's see Rashi inside from the top of the Amud. So we have 2 options. The first option was slice the mavi down the middle. Umamidi l'oker shel mavi be'emtza pesach. He takes this board which is 10 tefachim high, 4 amas long, and runs it down the middle of the pesach. The kivan the ike hechshem mavi be'orka shel pas. Since the orka of the pas, a length, is sufficiently sized to be considered hechshem mavi, meaning it has the size of a mavi, the minimum length of a mavi is 4 amas. So this board, which is running down the middle of your mavi, is a mavi wall, because it has a shiur of a mavi. This results in splitting the mavois into two mavois, havel kushtei mavois. We regard them as two alleyways running side by side. And now the Pesach is properly configured. So we have two doorways. One entryway for this mavi, and the entryway which is on the other side of this board belongs to the second mavi, and each one is 10 amos or less, and you're fine. That's the first option. Rav Yehuda gives us another option. Placing a board, strategically placing it right by the entryway. So he leaves a gap of 2 amos min ha-koisel. He places the board 2 amos from the wall. Then he places a pas for Yusei Mishalish amos, and it has 3 amos. Listam ha-pesach to block the doorway. V'nimtzu 5 amos elustomos. So we regard these 4 amos as though they're closed off. Why? Explains Rashi. What happened to that 2 amma gap which was not blocked? Shepirtza shtei amos. The gap of 2 amos niteres ba'oimed merubalein. The fact that there's oimed, which is greater in size than those parts. The built portion, the board which is 3 amos, is larger in size than the gap which is merely 2 amos. So that gap becomes bottle. The parts becomes bottle to the oimed. So this is a review of this case where we have 15, we're trying to break it down to get it down to 10. The same thing will apply to our case where we have 20 amos. We need to break it down to 10. If the entryway is 20 amos wide, so he does this twice. Once on the right side of the mavi, and once on the left side of the entryway to the mavi. He goes ahead and does this configuration, deducting 5 amos from the right of the mavi, blocking 5 from the left, which results in a 10 amma entryway. Or, Rashi gives us another eitzah, a yasa pas sheish amos. So he makes a board which is 6 amos long, v'yachak dal amos, and leaves 4 amos empty. So alongside one of the walls, he's going to take a 6 amma board, leave a gap of 4. So the 6 amos is greater in size than the gap. So it's being mevatel the pirza. So this will give us a total of 10 blocked. So this deducts 10 of the 20, and you're left with merely a pesach of 10. And the 4 amma gap will become mutter because the oimed, which is the 6 amma board, is larger in size than the parts, and the parts is bottled to the oimed, and it too is considered to be blocked as though it's built up. So we have 2 options here. One is running the board through the middle of the mavi, splitting into 2, or blocking part of the entryway. Says the Gemara, we want to analyze Rav Yehuda's approach. He told us to take a mavi which is 15 amos wide, take a board which is merely 3 amos, leave a gap of 2 amos near the wall, place that right next to it, thereby closing up 5 amos. So you deducted 5 from the 15, you're left with 10. Says the Gemara, why do we prefer this option? Perhaps we can approach it differently, which will seem to be better and superior than this approach that Rav Yehuda mentioned. V'amai. Says the Gemara, why does he take a board which is 3 amos, places it next to a gap of 2 amos? Perhaps we can approach it a bit differently, in a way where, number one, he doesn't need to trouble himself to find a large size board. Perhaps we can address the problem even using smaller size boards. That's number one. Number two, rather than leaving simply an open gap, perhaps let's configure this blockage in a manner where you have perhaps 2 boards on both sides of that gap, which will give it the impression of a doorway, of a pesach, rather than merely just an open gap, which appears like a pirza. So perhaps let's offer an option which seems better than Rav Yehuda. V'amai says, well, why do it this way? Yasa pas amma. Why shouldn't he go ahead and take a board which is an amma wide, an amma umechza? Yasa pas amma umechza. V'yarchik shtei amis. So let him take the pas, which is an amma and a half, 1.5, place it next to the wall, flush to the wall of the mavi. V'yarchik shtei amis, and then go ahead and leave a gap of 2 amis next to that. V'yasa pas amma mechza, and place another board, which is an amma and a half, alongside that 2 amma gap, thereby blocking off a total of 5. Now, why is this advantageous to the earlier option? Because, number one, doesn't need to find this large size board. Even if he finds two smaller size boards of 1.5, it's enough. And number two, you're surrounding that 2 amma gap with two boards. It appears more like an entry, like a Pesach. So why didn't Rabbi Yehuda prefer this option? Says the Gemara, apparently there's a problem with this approach. Why? Because the gap in between these two 1.5 boards is actually greater in size than each one of those boards independently. It's only when you combine those two boards. So it's 1.5 plus 1.5 to equal 3. The total of the boards will surpass the size of the gap. Will result in the concept of oimed merubal parts. Built is greater than the unbuilt. But each board independently, each oimed independently is not larger in size than the gap in the pirza. So apparently the fact that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't suggest this option seems to indicate to us that one cannot combine two portions of a wall where each one isn't independently larger than the gap. You can't combine those two together to nullify the gap alongside them. Shma mina, we can deduce from here that oimed merubal parts, we're trying to achieve oimed, which is greater than the parts, mishtei ruchos. If we need to combine from two sides, two independent portions of a wall, to combine them to have oimed, which is greater than the gap, lo have oimed. We don't consider it to be oimed because since each one independently doesn't have the ability to be mavatal the parts, and actually you can't combine with your friend to nullify the parts. It's the parts itself is going to nullify the oimed, which is alongside it, because it's greater in size than the built portion. So apparently that's the pshat why we can't apply this option. Says more, is that the case? Says more, lo, no, not necessarily. Lo oilam emelach ava oimed. Perhaps you could combine the oimed mishtei ruchos to nullify the parts next to them. Why can't you apply the option that I mentioned in the case of the Mavi? For a different reason altogether. There's another concern. Here it's different. The asi avira da haigisa. Avira da haigisa mevatale. What's happening is that the post, you have 1.5 near the wall. You have 2, which is parts next to it, and you have another post, which is 1.5. This second 1.5 post is surrounded on all sides with gaps, with avir, which are greater in size than itself. On one side you have the 2 amma parts, on the other side you have this grand entranceway to the Mavi. So each one of these gaps is greater in size than that post. You can't use that post. That post is batal, since it's surrounded from all sides by avir, which is greater in size than itself. Says more again, Mishaneach, here it's different. The asi avir da haigisa. You can't apply your option because the avir, the space on one side of the post, avir da haigisa, and the space from the other side, will join together umavatale. They'll team up on this post and be mavatal the post. That's why you can't apply your option. Says, well, we have another option. V'yasa pas amma. Let him place a board which is an amma wide right next to the wall of the Mavi. V'yarchik amma, leave a gap of an amma. V'yasa pas amma. Affix another board, an amma wide. V'yarchik amma, leave a gap of an amma. V'yasa pas amma. And finally leave another board which is an amma in width. For a total of 5. 3 of which are boards built, and 2 of which are gaps. So this gives us a total of 5 mostly built, and therefore it's considered to be closed off. What's the benefit of this approach? Twofold. Number 1, he doesn't need to trouble himself to find large size boards. Number 2, the gaps in between those boards are surrounded from both sides by boards, which gives the appearance of a Pesach, of an entryway. So why does Rabbi Yehuda propose this configuration? Shma mina. Apparently, we're going to conclude from this, Oimed keporetz aser. Rabbi Yehuda holds that if we have Oimed, the built portion of a wall, which is equal in size to the parts, such as in our case where the board and the parts, the built and the unbuilt, are equal in size, aser. That built portion is not reckoned with. It's batal because it's not greater in size than the gap. Rashi brings it's actually a discussion, a machlekes later in the parak. So should we conclude that Rabbi Yehuda holds that such a situation would be asur? And that's why he didn't suggest this idea. Says Mar, no, la'olam emalach muta. Generally speaking, this is okay. V'shani in our case, there's another problem. The problem we mentioned earlier. Because if we take a look at that last post, the one near the large entryway, it's surrounded on both sides with gaps, with avir, which are either equal in size or actually greater in size than that post. So those two avirs, those two empty spaces, join forces, they combine to nullify that post. The asa avir the hagisa comes along the avir from one side, with the hagisa and the avir, the space on the other side, umevatle, and nullifies the post. That's why Yehuda couldn't suggest this idea. Says, well, we have another option, which seems to address all these concerns, and is superior than Rabbi Yehuda's option. Says the Gemara, let him do it as follows. Do it in a manner where at least the gap will be smaller than Rabbi Yehuda's gap of 2 amis. What should he do? Why shouldn't he merely leave a space of amma near the wall? Then go ahead and attach a pas which is an amma and a half wide, right next to that gap. Leave another amma, and erect an amma and a half of a board. So this will at least narrow the actual size of the gap. So we have the wall of the mavi. You have a gap of merely an amma, then a post an amma and a half wide, then a gap of amma, then a post an amma and a half wide. So you end up having a smaller size gap than Rav Yehuda's gap of 2 ammas. That itself is an advantage. And if you look closely, you addressed all the problems, because each built portion, each post, is greater in size than the gap next to it, which is merely an amma. The post is an amma and a half. This will be mevatel, the gap, mevatel the parts. And none of those concerns mentioned earlier will apply. This will result in a enclosed mavi. You're going to be blocking off those 5 ammas and lessening the width of the mavi, cutting it down from 15 to 10. So why don't we adopt this approach? Says you're right, this will be a legitimate approach. Rabban didn't burden this fellow to go ahead and have to strategically place his board in this manner. Chacham didn't want to be matriachim, and therefore they allowed him merely to apply Rabbi Yehuda's option of applying a 3 amma board, even though it's going to result in a large gap of 2 ammas. Continues the Gemara, but we have another concern here. Being that he created a gap at the opening of the mavi, perhaps we should be concerned that the inhabitants of the mavi will actually use that opening as their new entranceway, as their new exit out of the mavi, and abandon the grand entranceway, and it will be considered to be a non-functioning entity. So once it's been disabled, the kaira or the lechi placed alongside that former entry to the mavi will be considered to be deactivated and not useful any longer. The point of the lechi, the kaira, is to create that separation, that heker. Well, if it's not going to be used at the entryway, the lechi and kaira render obsolete. So why are we concerned? The dilma shavek pischa rabba. The person will abandon this large size entryway, and go ahead and enter through the small entryway to the mavi, meaning use this new gap as his way in and out of the mavi. There's no concern. Chazaka, we presume, a person doesn't abandon this large, conveniently sized entryway, and enter this small size, squeeze himself in through the small size gap. There's no such a concern. Why is this different than the halacha that they told us? Rav and Rasi told us that if a breach developed alongside the mavi, so on the walls of the side of the mavi, there was a pirza, which introduced the residents to a new entryway to the mavi, in and out. So since a new Pesach was developed, this negates the entryway to the mavi, the main entryway, and nullifies the effect of lecha v'kaira, since that entryway has been rendered obsolete, been deactivated. and the lechi v'koira are no longer effective. So why is this different than their case? Says the Gemara, there's a big difference. There, the pirza developed alongside the mavi, along the length of the mavi, which affords a convenient shortcut for the residents to use. So perhaps they'll prefer using that breach as their Pesach and negate the former entryway to the mavi. Hasam k'mamat bilucha. It lessens their trip. They need to walk less. It's a shortcut out of the mavi, so it's convenient. Hach, in our case, where the Pesach, the gap is where? It's at the entry point to the mavi. It's up in the front. It's right alongside the large entry point. They're not gaining anything. It's not providing a shortcut. It doesn't lessen their trip. There's no reason for them to use it, to prefer the small entryway over the large entryway. So there's no concern that they're going to abandon the main Pesach and use the small Pesach. So sorry if we have a large size mavi, for instance, a Pesach which is 20 amas wide, the Gemara gives us two options. How to go about cutting it down. One, run a board up the middle, breaking it into two. Number two, partially block the entryway to the mavi by placing a board. Continues the Gemara. Tanan Hasam, we learned in the Mishnah. Oira asla v'chalal shavay mitzdarfim b'tefach. So we have a sheet of leather, the oira asla used for the bathroom, and there is a hole in the middle. That's the chalal. So the oira asla v'chalal shaloi, with its gap, mitzdarfin b'tefach or litafach, they're considered to be a tefach in width. Rashi explains this is with regards to tumah. So the minimum size of an oil, a roof, which allows transferring of the tumah to anything beneath it. So if there's a tumah underneath the oil and something which is tar, the oil spreads that tumah to the area underneath it. The minimum size of an oil is a tefach. So if this sheet of leather has a hole in it, we go ahead and we combine the intact portion, the leather portion, together with the hole inside. The hole is batal to the leather. So although in total, the intact and the hole are merely a tefach, we regard this entire piece of leather, though it has a tefach intact, and can function as an oil tefach. So oir ha'asla b'chalal shaloy mitzdarfin b'tefach. My oir ha'asla, what is this? Amar Rabbi B'chana, Rav Yochanan, oir kisei shal beis ha'kisei. It's the covering, the leather, which is used as a covering for the beis ha'kisei. V'kama, how large hole are we speaking about? Says the Gemara, Asher of Dimi Amar, he said as follows: Etzba'ai mikan. So the leather sheet here is designed as follows. There are 2 finger widths on either side of the hole. Etzba'ai mikan, 2 fingers on one side. Etzba'ai mikan, on the other side of the hole, we have leather which is 2 etzbois in width. Etzba'ai revach b'emtza. In the middle, there's the revach, the gap, which is also 2 etzbois wide. So we have this piece of leather, which totals 6 finger widths, which is considered a tefach. We have the gap in the middle. On either side, we have leather intact. 2 etzbois width on this side, 2 on this side, and 2 in the middle. So although the portion which is intact is equally sized to the gap, we consider the gap to be a batal. So the portion which is intact, the parutz, is batal to the oimit. So that's Rav Dima's description. 2 and 2. Ki also Rav Amar, when he came, he explained as follows: Etzba u'mechza mikan. We have the sheet of leather, which has a hole in the middle. On either side of the hole, how much leather is intact? How wide is it? The width of an etzba and a half. Etzba u'mechza mikan on one side, the etzba u'mechza mikan, and 1.5 etzbois on the other side of the hole. The gap in the middle is actually an etzba wide for a total of 4 etzbois. Only a bailer of dimi. Mi piligisu, is there a machlekes in halacha between the 2 of you? You who describe the tefach as consisting of 6 etzbois, in contrast to Eruvin, who spoke about 4 etzbois. Is there a halachic difference between the 2 of you? Amar lei lois. Rav Dimi responded, certainly not. There's no halachic point of contention here. It's simply 2 ways to describe the same tefach. It depends what size fingers we're speaking about. Haber of Ervasa, he was speaking about large size fingers. 4 thumbs are contained in a tefach. Habazatras, I was speaking about small sized fingers, pinkies, in which case 6 are contained in a tefach. V'loi pligin, actually there's absolutely no halachic machlokes between the two of us. Amar Leis, Abai responded, La'aye pligisu, actually it does appear that there is a halachic difference between the two of you. Why? We discussed earlier that oimid needs to be greater in size than the parts. So the built portion needs to be greater in size to be mevatel the unbuilt portion. Now, let's say the oimid on one side of the gap is not greater in size than the gap itself. Rather, we must combine forces. We must take 2 oimdim on both sides of the pirza to combine them, to join forces, to have a total of built greater than unbuilt. That's the oimd mishtei ruchos. Can one be metzaref the oimd mishtei ruchos to mevatel parts or not? Says Abaye, this exact question seems to be the point of contention between you and Ravin. Why? Because in contrast to you, Rav Dimi, who described the Oir Ha'asal, this leather seat cover, as follows. It was designed in a way where you have a hole in the middle, and on either side of that hole, there's leather intact. What size? How much leather is intact? So you described it as follows. The hole in the middle was 2 etzbais, and the leather on either side, the intact leather, was 2 etzbais on the right side of the hole, 2 etzbais on the left side of the hole. Now, the oimid on the side of the hole is not greater in size than the hole. They're both the same size. They're both 2 etzbais. So how can the oimid be mevatel the parts? How can we say the hole is batel to the side? Apparently you hold that one can join forces, one can combine the oimid mishtei ruchos. You can take the intact portion from both sides of that gap, join them together to nullify the gap. So in contrast to you, who seems to hold of that, Ravin, who described the Or a bit differently, doesn't seem to concur with this approach, because he said that the hole in the middle was merely an etzba wide. The intact portion, the oimid, on either side was actually larger than the hole. You had an etzba and a half on the right side, an etzba and a half on the left side. Why did he need to describe it in this manner? That the intact portion was larger than the hole. Apparently he holds that we require that the oimid on the side of the gap should be greater in size than the gap itself. You can't join with the other oimid. So apparently indeed this seems to be a machlokes between the two of you. Let's see inside. Amalei, so I responded, La'ai pligisu. It appears indeed that there is a machlokes. U'ba'oimid merubal apart mishtei ruchos pligisu. When we need to combine the oimid mishtei ruchos from both sides to overwhelm that parts, can we do that or not? That indeed is the point of contention between you and him. LIVEDAF, according to you, yes, one can combine the oimid from both sides to nullify the parts. In contrast to Ravin, who described the oimid, the intact portion on the side of the hole, as being larger, greater in size than the hole, he holds that it needs to be greater on its own. You can't combine the intact portion from both sides to overwhelm the parts. The intact portion on the side of the parts needs to be greater than the parts. But you can't combine it from both sides. Why? The fact is, he described the oimid as being greater in size than the parts. If he would have agreed with you, he didn't need to describe it in that manner. He could have described the intact portion to be identically sized as the parts. Why did it need to be greater? Apparently he holds that the oimid on the side of the parts itself needs to be greater than the parts. Because if you hold there's no machlokes between the two of you, Ravin should have described the leather as follows. Etzba shlish mikan, ve'etzba shlish mikan, ve'etzba shlish ravach be'emtza. He should have described them all equally sized. The hole in the middle was an etzba ushlish, 1 1/3 finger widths, and the intact leather on either side was equal to the parts. Was each one only an etzba and 1/3. So again, he should have described it etzba ushlish mikan, an etzba and 1/3 of intact leather on one side of the hole, the etzba ushlish mikan, and an etzba and 1/3 of leather on the other side of the hole, the etzba ushlish ravach be'emtza, and an etzba and 1/3 of gap in the middle. Why did he need to describe the intact portion on the side of the gap as being larger than the gap. Apparently he holds you can't join the two intact portions together. The two pieces of leather on both sides of the gap. The leather on the side of the gap on its own needs to be larger than the gap. Therefore, he described the intact portion as being an etzba and a half wide, which was indeed larger in size than the gap, which was merely an etzba wide. So this was Abaye proving his point, that indeed there seems to be a machlekes between you and Ravan whether we can join the oindim together. So Ravan responded, he says, I disagree. I'll prove to you that that's not the point of contention. I don't hold you can join two oindim together. He says like this, Ve'elamai pliginon. So you maintain that we have this machlekes whether you can join the two oindim. So why did I have to describe the leather the way I did it? Why did I say it was 2, 2, and 2? 2 intact, 2 whole, 2 intact. In which case the intact and the whole were equally sized, both 2 and 2. If I hold you can join two intact portions with each other to overwhelm the parts, I could have described it a bit differently. I could have said that the intact portion on the sides of the gap were actually each one independently smaller than the gap. Why do they overwhelm the gap? Why do they mevatel the parts? Because they join forces. Why did I have to say it was 2, 2, and 2, in which case the intact portion is equally sized to the gap? Apparently, I don't hold you can join the oindim together. Says the Gemara, Ve'elamai pliginon. So you say this is the point about machlekes? I should have described it a bit differently. I should have said that the intact portion was actually smaller than the gap. Why is it mevatel the gap? Because it joins forces with the gap, with the intact portion on the other side. I should have said etzba ushnei shlishim mikan, that on one side we have leather which is intact, with a width of an etzba and 2/3, the etzba ushnei shlishim mikan, and on the other side of the gap we have leather intact, which has a size of an etzba and 2/3, so 1 and 2/3. The etzba ayim ushnei shlishim revach be'emtza, with a gap in the middle, which is larger in size than each of these sides independently. We have a gap which is 2 etzbois plus 2/3, 2 and 2/3 etzbois, which is actually greater in size than either of the intact portions on either side of that gap. Because if I hold you can join those intact portions with each other, this description would also suffice. Because although each side independently is smaller than the gap is very large, 2 and 2/3 etzbois, and the intact portion is merely 1 and 2/3, that's not a problem because I join forces with the other intact portion, which overwhelm the gap. So the fact that I didn't describe it in this manner, rather I said it's 2 intact, 2 gap, and 2 intact, I don't hold we can join 2 intact portions together. Rather, if there's a machlekes between myself and Ravan, it's based on a different question. A question is, can one be mevatel the parts when the oimed is equally sized? So in my case, when the intact portion is merely 2 etzbois next to the gap which has 2 etzbois, so they're equally sized. Apparently I hold that's enough to be mevatel the parts. Parts ka'oimed is batel. Whereas Ravan, who described the leather, the Ura Asla, in a manner where the hole inside is smaller than the intact portion next to it. He says the intact portion was 1.5 etzbois, the hole was merely 1 etzba wide. He holds that if they would have been equally sized, the parts would not go away. It wouldn't become batel. So if anything, that would be the point of contention. Says the Gemara, the pliginon. If you want to say that there is a machlekes, the parts ka'oimed palginon. The machlekes pertains to a case where the parts is equally sized to the oimed. So according to me, it's batel. So even though the Asla has a revach of 2 in the middle and an oimed of merely 2, the revach is batel, as opposed to Ravan, who described the hole as being smaller than the oimed next to it. He holds that if it would have been equally sized, it wouldn't have been batel. Okay, time for a brief chazar of today's daf. We began with Rav Yosef telling us that alongside a lechi one cannot carry. The length of a mobis for amis, a lechi which is visible outside, is sufficient. The Gemara told us how wide can the entryway to a Mavi be? According to Tanakam, up till 10 ames. According to Avyuda, greater than 10 ames. Exactly how wide, we're unsure. The Gemara tells us, if the Pesach is 20 ames wide, so you must lessen the width. He has two options. He places a board alongside the middle, splitting it into two, or he partially covers the entranceway by placing a board which is 3 amas wide, as described in the Gemara. We concluded with the Ura Asla, which appears to be a machlekes between Rav Dimi and Ravin. Abaye suggested the machlekes is whether we can combine two oimdim to nullify the parrots. Rav Dimi responded, no, that's not the machlekes. Machlekes is in a case where the oimid is equally sized to the parrots, whether it can be involved to the parrots or not.